So what Grandmasters have been telling me is that the most exciting game Kasparov has played in his return to chess was his victory over Lenier Dominguez in the Blitz in St. Louis. I've decided to analyze the game here, and I may have some surprising conclusions. So the game continued. It was a Sicilian, and Kasparov played his usual Najdorf. Dominguez played h3, which he's played a lot recently. Kasparov went for e6, which generally aims for b5 and bishop to b7. So white went g4. Kasparov played h6, which is a bit rare. Bishop e7 is far more common. Bishop g2, g5. So basically he just wants to play knight bd7 and knight e5 in most cases, securing the e5 square for the knight, which can never be driven away by a pawn at this point. So bishop e3 was played, and actually better is to play b3, and the reason why is, let's say black goes for his usual setup where he tries to plant the knight on e5. Now if he goes for something like this where he just plays bishop e7, white can play knight ce2, and after he plays f4, here black's definitely going to have some difficulty defending his weaknesses in the center and also dealing with some pressure on the f-file. So this is definitely going to be better for white. So this is the reason why this line is rarely played nowadays. So presumably Kasparov just saved this for the Blitz. I'm not sure what he would have played in a longer game, but this seems like an excellent Blitz opening. So Dominguez, he went for bishop e3, queen e2, and decided to castle queenside. And after knight fd7, he played, so white plays h4, and of course he can't trade off the g5 stronghold. He should just try to support it with rook g8. So he plays rook g8, just holding on very solidly. Takes. And in many cases, black would like to play knight g6 and knight f4 in the near future. So black plays b5. And here white needs to start looking for some kind of active plan, because if he doesn't, he has a good chance of being strategically worse. So in this case, white played a3, which I don't really like. What's been played here before was f4. And the idea of this move is that white can hope to play g5 and maybe rook h7 and may actually have some pressure. And black should objectively be fine because he's very solid. Let's say something like bishop b7, g5, queen b6. Here black can just try to castle queenside. So something like rook h7, queenside castle. Let's say if bishop h3, we can play king to b8. And in this position, I think black is sufficiently solid. So let's go back. All right, so in the game he played a3, which is a solid move, but we have to start asking ourselves very soon, what is white's plan going to be? Is he going to aim for a pawn break? Because this is a semi-closed position, and white needs to try to open up the game somehow. So either he's going to aim for some kind of piece sacrifice on d5 or f5, or play f4. And if he doesn't have anything in mind, it's going to be very difficult to get any sort of play. So bishop to b7 was played, and now white played bishop c1. Yeah, I mean, in some cases, white just may want to wait for knight c4 to drop back. For example, a reasonable move here could be f3, just securing everything. And white may even want to play a plan like, for example, bishop f1 and bishop c1 later, let's say after knight c4. And if rooks, he might want to meet rook c8 with knight a2 and knight b4. So, but it's difficult to come up with suggestions here. So he plays bishop c1, rook c8, which is a very good typical move from Kasparov. He would like to simply take and then play knight c5 and knight a4 when white's kingside would be permanently damaged. So, rook h3 was played to prevent the sacrifice, which looked pretty natural. Although I think that better was to play knight to a2 and then knight to b4, which in some cases can continue with knight to b3, or in other cases simply c3 and knight bc2 could be very solid for white in the center. So, rook h3 was played, and black went knight to g6. All right, well, black is suddenly starting to get some threats. Knight g4 might be an idea in the near future. White has a really interesting idea here. He could actually play rook h7, which I really like, because it counters knight f4 in a very interesting way. So, for example, if here he can play takes, and he has the e5 shot, which is excellent because both bishops are undefended. So let's say after takes, we can play e takes d6, and now the threat is just knight takes e6. And let's see, can he play? If bishop takes d6, I believe we can play, yeah, we can play rook takes f7 here. And here the position is completely chaotic after knight e5, rook takes f4. It's very hard to tell what happens here, but this would have been a very reasonable try, and judging by how difficult the position would be for Kasparov, anything could happen here. So this would have been a really, really interesting try. And of course, putting the rook on h5 was a possibility at a number of different points as well. So bishop h1. All right, so he moves the bishop out of the way, so he doesn't have to deal with knight f4 anymore. And now knight de5 was played, which was an excellent move by Kasparov. You can see all of his pieces are pretty well placed. He's probably going to put the bishop on e7 very soon. So now white played rook g3, and this is simply very passive. I think he should have played rook h5 and just put some pressure on the g5 pawn. And then if bishop e7, now we could play knight f3. And now he's starting to challenge the central knights. So if takes takes, he could play something like knight e5, queen h3. And here white is actually fairly active. He's preventing the sacrifice on c3, and I would say he has a good amount of activity. So instead he played rook g3. Now it seems like he's already worse, and so black played bishop to e7. Of course, rook h8 is also a pretty good move to consider here. And now he played knight a2, which was very, very passive. As I was saying before, white needs to think about pawn breaks, which are very difficult to dream of here. Also, sacrifices are hard to imagine. I was wondering at first what happens if knight f5, which is an interesting shot, because if takes takes, we do get some very good play, because the knight on g6 is in some trouble, and if he goes back, for example, then f4 is a very strong move due to the pin on the g-file. But after knight f5, there's simply knight f4, which is extremely strong because of takes takes. So this would be a definite problem for white, but he could maybe just move the queen out of the way so that knight f4 doesn't have any power. After something like queen f1, maybe knight f5 could be a very interesting idea. So Dominguez had very low time here, but had he had more time, perhaps queen f1 could have been a really, really interesting try. So anyway, knight a2 was played, and let's see, rook h8, good move, putting the rook on the open file, rook c3, and here, and on the next couple of moves, knight f4 would have been a good move, and black simply has the bishop pair, and an excellent structure, an excellent knight on e5. So let's see, takes, what do you do now? Queen c7, bishop g2, and here, and on the next couple moves, rook h2 was a reasonable idea. Here, perhaps bishop f1 would simply be played. So queen c4 was played. I think this was a mistake because there's no clear follow-up. I mean, for example, after queen c4, trading queens was a mistake. And the reason why it was a mistake is because now there are a bunch of weak pawns, and rook h2 is coming, which is a very strong move. So white should have simply played queen to e3, and it's not really clear if black has anything special here. So this was undoubtedly a big improvement. Black should have simply played knight f4, and as I said before, he has the bishop pair and a quite comfortable advantage. So queen c4 takes, and now it was very strong to simply take with the pawn. There's constant pressure on g4 here. So after f3, rook h2, bishop f1, knight f4, yeah, bishop e3, bishop d8. Now there's this threat, and white's position is coming under a ton of pressure. It's going to be very difficult to defend the base of the pawn chain on f3. So white played rook d2, and black simply traded. And this looked very good. So if he wants to prevent bishop b6, he's pretty limited. Maybe he'll have to play something like knight a4, and perhaps Kasparov might have even repeated and simply played this and then followed up with d5. For example, if knight c3, then maybe he would have followed up with d5. So after he traded off here the endgame looked totally winning for black, simply because he's going to lose a very important pawn, and then he has two isolated pawns to deal with after this. So d5 was played, and that was a crucial pawn break, and now f3 is extremely weak. So takes, and now I do not think this position can be defended due to the bishop pair and at least one of these pawns dropping off. So bishop g2 was played, and what did he play? Yeah, he simply took. And now if takes, I think the simplest is just takes, and bishop to b7. And here, although it's 4 versus 4, the bishops are basically dominating the knights, and the e-pawn is going to be extremely powerful, and it's very likely that g-pawn is going to drop off. So after knight takes f4, there was knight e3, and if something like c3, then just bishop a8, and black is completely winning. So From here, yep, he simply captured and then captured the pawn, and there was nothing to really see from here with these connected pass pawns in the center. It was really as simple as just pushing the pawns. See a lot of games, especially with amateurs, where one side just has a couple of very strong pass pawns late in an endgame, and all they really need to do is push those pawns and focus on those pawns. So that's really all that Kasparov aimed for here. So he didn't really make any mistakes. Pushed the pawn, brought his king into d5, c3, bishop e5, takes, and even here with 3 versus 2, the win was never in any doubt. So he simply took, and I think he resigned now. So an excellent game by Kasparov. He was never really in any danger. There was really only maybe 1 or 2 chances available for Dominguez to get some active play, and when he missed those chances, everything was in Kasparov's hands, and he was the only one with any activity. So a typical win for Kasparov, but an excellent high-quality game for something that was played with a time control of 5-3, which is relatively fast, especially for timed blitz. So very impressive to see Kasparov playing at his best in this St. Louis tournament.